That North line was not in the prepared Fox biography. But when I was with Larry earlier today, I asked him, because we were going through his lovely offices and meeting his entire crew that does such great work that obviously I never had. You can tell by the smile. And I said, Larry, how do you advertise? He said, word of mouth. Well, it was the same reaction I gave him this afternoon. Oh, yeah. But I appreciate very much, Larry, your kind introduction, the kindness and graciousness of the hospitality and the chance to be with you and your friends here tonight. And my thanks also to Dan, who didn't get a warm mouthful tonight. Thank you, Dan, for being part of this and encouraging so many people to come and be part of it as well. I would also want to thank Fox News for not sending me, they gave me an option. I could be here or I can be in Erbil, Kurdistan. And they gave me the option of going to Kurdistan tomorrow. So I appreciate the last good meal I'm going to eat for some time. I would also tell you that the Fox News folks have been very helpful in helping us to let the Freedom Alliance do the kinds of work that it's done so well. You've heard from Tom Kilgannon and two of our scholarship recipients what Freedom Alliance does. I want to just share with you some of the reasons why we do it. On the 2nd of August, 1990, a quarter of a century ago, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. 5 days later, the first U.S. forces arrived in Saudi Arabia in preparation for eventually liberating Kuwait. Lieutenant General Ed Bronars, who at one point had been my division commander, a Naval Academy graduate, a hero of both the Korean and Vietnam Wars, and the man my classmates chose to head my defense fund back in the 1980s, walked into my office where we were making armor at the time. My patents are all in ballistic protective equipment. And he said, you know, we need to do something to support our troops because we cannot let happen to these troops what happened to those of us who served in Vietnam. 3 weeks later, Freedom Alliance filed the paperwork, and they didn't have Lois Lerner working on it, so we got it approved. I'm sorry. Larry said, no politics. I'm trying, Larry. I'm trying not to be political. 3 weeks later, Freedom Alliance got the charter, its 501c3 status, and we started right then supporting our troops with care packages. By Christmas, we send out tens of thousands of Christmas presents by name to American servicemen serving overseas out at sea at the same time. And we provided help to the families who are always disadvantaged when one of the family leaders is gone. And that happens all the time in the military. Today, Freedom Alliance is all about what happens to today's troops. We call it situational awareness. The young Army, highly decorated Army soldiers, the sergeants first class who are in here, understand, and so do the Marines, so does anybody else who serves in today's military. Situational awareness is knowing what's going on, knowing what you have to do about it, and just getting it done. Don't waste a lot of time asking questions. No fanfare, just get the job done. I will share this with you. I've learned not everyone has situational awareness. I give you as an example, I got stranded in the Indianapolis airport just a few weeks ago on a flight back from the West Coast. Instead of going to Chicago to change planes, we stopped in Indianapolis without a plane. And we were parked there for some hours. The terminal, C terminal, which is the United terminal, I was not going to name the airline, try not to embarrass United. The C terminal is about half the size of this room and it had about 3 times the number of people in it. So there's no place to sit. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm wearing a baseball hat and sunglasses, and I'm looking desperately for a place to plug in my phone to call home and tell my wife why I'm not there. And I finally see an empty plug, one of the very few left in the terminal, apparently. It's behind an older gentleman. I can say older at 72. He was older than I was. I leaned over him and I said, excuse me, sir, can I plug in my phone behind you? And he looks up at me and he says, I know who you are. Let's not start something in here tonight we can't finish. He let me plug in the phone, and then he looks up at me and he says, I used to watch you on television. Now, look, I work for Fox News. All we ask is 24/7, 365. That's all we're asking for. I'm on 6 hours every weekend on Fox Business Network. Starts at 8 p.m. Eastern, ends after an exercise in bladder control at 11, right? 3 hours Saturday, 3 hours Sunday. Please, turn off the football game, turn off the World Series. Fox News is all we're asking for. But apparently he stopped watching. because I used to watch you on television. Then he says to me, that book you wrote about World War II, I cried on every page. Now, I didn't mean to say anything that was hurtful. I've written 3 books about World War II. He apparently quit after the first one. And then he says to me, can I have your autograph, Mr. Brokaw? Apparently I'm not wearing enough makeup anymore. I was glad he didn't say Brian Williams. We really did get shot down. And I've got this, what my wife says is an unfortunate habit I have. She calls me a smart aleck. Actually, it's another word that begins with A. And as proof, just to let her know, Fox gives us cards for this very purpose. This is one of the Fox cards. It says War Stories with Oliver North. It's got the Fox News logo on it. It's got the Fox address and a phone number. And so you don't have to share shopping bags when people ask you for an autograph. I flip the card over and it's blank on the back. And I write, to whom shall you like? What may I write this? And he said, make it out to Phil. Phil, all the best, Tom. And hand him the card. At this point, the man has tears in his eyes. He looks at the card and he says, I'm the only happy person in this airport tonight. Now I feel like absolute dog dung. What do you do? What's the right thing? What's the morally right thing to do? You were praised by the pastor when I was up here, Larry. What is the right thing to do at this point? Do you say, I'm not really Tom? Do you say, have you ever seen this big gap in Tom Brokaw's teeth? I took the coward's way out. I said nothing and walked away. I got home and I told my lovely wife, my moral arbiter of 47 years of my life, I told her what I did, and she says, you're a jerk. You're such a jerk. He's going to get home, take the card out, and he's going to show it to his wife. Look, I got Tom Brokaw. What the heck is Tom Brokaw using Ollie North's cards for? My beat at Fox News. I don't have to run around after politicians. I don't mean to say anything bad about my friends who are politicians here. I don't have to run out to California and wait for Brittany to shave some part of her body I didn't want to see anyway. My only beat is soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, Marines, and law enforcement, first responders. That's it. My only beat. For the past 14 years, Fox News has given me the privilege of keeping company with heroes. Larry said that a few minutes ago up here. Tomorrow I'm going to fly home, pick up my flak jacket, my helmet, my field kit, and head off to Erbil, Kurdistan to cover another group of American heroes. For some, a hero is a person who catches the pass at the Friday night football game, or someone who's wearing a spandex suit and a cape. But my heroes, as Larry put it, wear dog tags and flak jackets, helmets and flight suits, and they go to work in some of the most difficult and dangerous places on earth. And bad things happen in some cases like we just heard on this stage. The classical definition of a hero is not someone who wears a cape, not someone who catches a pass. The classical definition of the word hero is a person who puts themselves at risk for the benefit of others. I've seen it happen thousands of times. Since 9/11/01, the best and bravest of an entire generation, 2.5 million brave young Americans, have gone to war to protect us and offer others the hope of freedom. My job is to let them tell their stories without telling enemies things that enemies don't need to know. I want to relate what I do because it's somewhat personal. When I turned 71 last October, one of my producers who had been with me the whole time was concerned because at the time we only had 14 grandkids and now we have 16 and 2/3 grandkids. And he was worried about what those grandkids were going to think when they got old enough to realize Granddad had missed all those birthdays, all those holidays, all those fun things like graduations from this, that, and the other thing. And so he put together, in 2 minutes, what was then 57 embeds, now it'll soon be 58, embeds with U.S. troops, so that I have something to show them. These are the heroes that I get to keep company with. These are the remarkable young Americans that my producer was concerned ought to have their day. It's about soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, and Marines. The company that I've kept, the difficult and dangerous places they go to work. Average age is 20 and a half. They're all high school graduates at minimum, but the average Enlistment education is 13 and a half years of education. They're much more likely to be married today than they ever have been before. Most have made multiple deployments, none in conditions you would consider to be pleasant. The enemies that they face are vicious, brutal, often suicidal, certainly the most inhumane that we've encountered since the Pacific theater of World War II. They operate and maintain the most sophisticated weapons and equipment ever designed by the hand and mind of man. They can use their weapons like they're part of their bodies. They can use their bodies as weapons. They can take a life or save one because they've been so remarkably well trained. The accountability and responsibility they have as young team leaders, leading 3 others, exceeds that of any CEO of any company in America because they're responsible for lives as well as equipment. For them, the expression, "I've got your back," is not an ad for a mattress company. Think about it. And in fact, for the very first time since the American Revolution, every single person wearing a uniform of the Armed Forces of the United States is a volunteer. There's not one conscript, one draftee in our military today. Everyone who stayed in after 9/11/01, who came in since then, knew that they were going to go to a war, and many of them have. Instead of praising this perseverance, the courage, the tenacity, the skill, many in our mainstream media, and quite frankly some in politics, tear down those who served our nation in harm's way. The media coverage today isn't nearly as vicious as it was for Vietnam, but they still try. They beat Abu Ghraib. I go to a college campus when Fox makes me go to talk to journalism students, and I mention the word Abu Ghraib, and I say, everybody's heard of it. Everybody's heard of Abu Ghraib. They made it sound like it was standard practice. It was an aberration. It lasted for 4 days. It's been on the news now for almost 11 years. Newsweek created a totally fictitious story about a Quran being flushed down a toilet at Gitmo. I was in Najaf when that story broke on a Friday prayers. There were thousands of people who perished as a consequence of that false story. Not all of them Americans, but some died. They attacked the government center where 4 were killed that afternoon and evening. And that kind of thing went on for week after week after week. And even after Newsweek finally acknowledged that they'd made the whole thing up, it continued. We had a United States senator, who shall otherwise remain nameless, who described those who serve in our armed forces as those likened to those who'd served Stalin, Hitler, and Pol Pot in Cambodia. We have a Pulitzer Prize recipient named Chris Hedges, who writes for a rag called the New York Crimes and the Washington Compost. Pulitzer Prize recipient, who described those who serve thus, and this is a quote, "They're nothing but poor," God knows why he picked these places, "nothing but poor kids from Mississippi, Texas, and Alabama who couldn't get decent jobs or health insurance, so they joined the military because that's all we offered them." Dead wrong, Mr. Hedges. That's not the people serving in our military today. Here's what they actually look like. These are frames. We've shot over 30,000 hours of video in this war. I've interviewed tens of thousands of youngsters. I've asked them all, why did you join? And the reason they gave for joining was what you saw on the screen just a moment ago. Even though they might have only been 4 or 5 years old, they will tell you they know about 9/11. I asked them why they picked a particular branch of service. Slow down, Calvin, you're getting ahead of me. I asked them why they picked a particular branch of the service, and they'll say because I had a role model, a dad, an uncle, a coach, a teacher, someone that they looked up to who'd gone in that branch of the service. I can tell you right now, I've watched these 2 Army sergeants in first class. Where are you guys? Stand up for a second. Just let the American people see 2 heroes. I can just tell you right now, there's young guys who walked into that recruiting station and saw those guys and decided they want to join the United States Army. And since I grew up in the Army, I don't have any trouble saying that. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your service and for being here. Try this one. Bring the lights up just a little bit so I can see. How many of you have ever raised a teenage boy? Come on, I used to raise my hand until Betsy caught me. She said, you didn't do that, I did it. You were gone. Think about getting a teenage boy to get up at 0400 in the morning, go out and do all the things that have to be done, to include cleaning the place, doing the wash, taking care of your clothing, taking care of your kid, cleaning your weapon, go out, spend 18 hours and come back and do the same thing day after day after day. The kid who once wouldn't share a candy bar with his little brother will now give away his last drop of water to a wounded comrade. He gives only MRE to a hungry Iraqi or Afghan kid, and has split his ammo with a mate in a firefight. They have shown, not just by teaching, they've shown how to treat kids and women in a part of the world where treating kids and women like human beings is a foreign language. They've demonstrated it day in and day out there. There's a couple other qualities, like tenacity and courage, all the rest of it. Well, let me just tell you, these youngsters don't hesitate to be able to set a great example in a gunfight or in looking after somebody else, like the innocent. Every once in a while something goes wrong because war is a terrible, terrible experience. I actually said on the air one day to Sean Hannity, I said, ground combat's the worst experience a human being can have. This is the feedback I got. Feedback's important. This is Fox News. I was overseas. This is what came in on the email right after I went live with Hannity, with a sergeant who just distinguished himself in a gunfight. Colonel North, on tonight's Hannity, you said, quote, ground combat's the worst experience a human can have. This is not true. The worst experience a human being can have is spending time with my mother-in-law. My best friend did 2 years in Iraq, did a tour of duty in Afghanistan. He lost his right hand in Fallujah. He's met my mother-in-law. I just called him. He agrees with me. He says it's not even a close call. Jim in San Diego. Every once in a while you kind of wonder, who is watching the Fox? Today's troops are brighter, better educated than anything you've ever seen before. I want you to just take a look at this because this is an example of faith. I dare the ACLU to tell these government employees to stop praying on government time. They're going out on a mission in armed combat. If you look at the screen, on the right-hand side of the screen, this is the frame taken off my helmet cam because I was going on that helicopter with him when I heard the Lance Corporal say, hey guys, Smitty and Dexter. Dexter is that yellow lab. Smitty and Dexter are going with us. Let's pray for them because they're getting off this helicopter first in the middle of a gunfight in a hot LC. Smitty and the dog. They're praying for Smitty and the dog. Wasn't a chaplain who sat down with him? It's a Lance Corporal, United States Marine Corps, who said, hey guys, we're all going on this helicopter together. Smitty and Dexter, we need to pray for him. That's the kind of faith that I see every day in that kind of a circumstance. It's not made up, it's not staged, it's the real thing. They're not going out on a football field. They're going into mortal combat against an enemy who wants to die trying to kill them. And the last part is one that several people asked me to show it today, so I said I would. This is from frames I shot on the 6th of April 2003. The unit I'm with is Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment. It's the lead element of the Marine attack up the eastern corridor to Baghdad. Baghdad is the smoke you can see in the background. Now, that's an oil refinery just south of the city. By the 9th, we were inside the city. This unit has just been engaged by a Republican Guards regiment. The unit's about 250 Marines. It's a reinforced Marine rifle company. The company commander deploys his people. They spin the vehicles around in the road because those are not armored vehicles. Those are what they call soft sides. The Marines didn't have enough for the armored vehicles. As Ron Rumsfeld pointed out accurately, you have to go to war with the army you've got, not the one you wish you had. And he was right. So they spin the vehicles around to give them a little more offset for the RPGs and the 50 caliber machine guns that are being fired at them. And in the middle of the gunfight, a United States Navy medical corpsman, that is corpsman, not corpsman. Sorry, I was out of control, Larry. United States Navy corpsman, 3rd class petty officer, 6 feet 4 inches tall, probably 230 pounds. He's wearing his full mop, chemical protective equipment, his gas mask, his helmet, 45 pounds of gear on his back. And he single-handedly is putting battle dressings on wounded Marines and putting them on his shoulders and carrying them to the helicopter. And by this time, this is the 4th casualty. The other 3 have already been loaded. I'm on the ramp because I was so out of breath I couldn't run back and forth with him any further. Unbeknownst to me, on the left-hand side, as you're looking at the screen, is a Reuters news crew is set up, made up of an Australian news crew. As the corpsman comes running to the bird, the crew chief starts yelling, the bird is taking hits. The skin of a helicopter is the thickness of a Coke can. Right? You can stick a pencil through one, and you can the same thing on the skin of the helicopter. We're going to take more casualties. We've got to go. He lays this wounded guy on the ramp. But if you look carefully, that's not a wounded Marine. That is a wounded Iraqi Republican Guardsman. He has just risked his life to save an enemy combatant. Puts the bird starts to lift, we run back, and he's got my microphone hanging off his flak jacket. And you can hear the Reuters news crews. All the gunfire shifts to the helicopter that's now turning and trying to fly back to the Forward Army and refueling point where the Army set up a hospital, field hospital. They set them up and tore them down, set them up, tore them down at least 25 times on the way up that road. And the Reuters news crew shouts out, "Hey mate, what did you do that for? Didn't you notice that was an Iraqi?" In other words, you stupid American. Larry, because we're in polite company tonight, I can only put it this way. The corpsman looks over at them, gives them a gesture, and says, and I'll omit the expletives. I mean, these guys can take out a Bible and quote Bible and verse, but they can also take profanity to the level of a new art form. And the corpsman looks over at him and flips, gestures over to him and says, "Didn't you notice bleepers? He was bleeping wounded. That's what we do. We're bleeping Americans." It's true. I want to just wrap this up by thanking you for what you do for them. Just give you a couple of thoughts. And I'm not trying to be political. These youngsters, these young Americans, deserve better than a commander-in-chief garbed as a Nobel laureate, kowtowing to foreign leaders. They deserve better than that. We ought to have a commander-in-chief who knows that America is the greatest force for good the world has ever known, and for which we have nothing to apologize. Our government's most important purpose is to protect our homeland and the American people. And yet, our supposed leaders in Washington have continued to fail in their duty to protect them, and the vulnerability to America increases almost every day. We've seen the graphic images of Americans being brutally murdered by ISIS. They've put them out all over the world, and they continue to do so. Our head of state has promised that these, quote, criminals will be brought to justice, but they never are. Here at home, law officers and military personnel and their dependents are now being targeted by name and address by ISIS for murder. On July 16th, Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz murdered 4 Marines and a Navy sailor in Chattanooga, Tennessee. In the immediate aftermath of that, the President of the United States refused to even name the perpetrator as a radical Islamist jihadi. Instead, he's issued more hollow promises that are going to stop these, quote, lone wolf extremists. I've got news for the folks in Washington. Our enemies are not just criminals or extremists. Our enemies are radical Islamist jihadis who want to die killing you and me and any other infidel. They use trade names like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Al-Shabaab, Jama'at Islamiyah, Abu Sayyaf, Hezbollah, Hamas, and a host of other titles. Some are Sunni, some are Shiite, some derive support from Arab entities, others from the Persians. No matter the sobriquet, they are one in their objective to destroy the United States and our ally Israel. It is not an accident that I'm wearing the colors of the Israeli flag here this evening. I'm going to be going there in the not too distant future. I want to encourage people to support Israel. As Ron Durham, the ambassador in Washington, said one day to my group, as we're getting ready to leave, he says, "It's wonderful to stand with Israel. It's better to stand in Israel while you're standing with Israel." And he's right. A little more than 6 years of this White House has resulted in coddled extremists and radical Islamists. We've done so little for so long. Vladimir Putin took the initiative and put a combined arms brigade in Syria just to save his friend Bashir Assad. He still intends, our commander-in-chief, to close Gitmo, reassured us of that yesterday, even though he's released dozens of violent jihadi terrorists from the detention center. He's now increased our jeopardy with an ill-conceived nuclear weapons deal with Iran. And instead of exploiting the gains made by American soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, guardsmen, they've squandered the blood and treasure expended in liberating Iraq, and they better not do the same thing in Afghanistan. Perhaps they don't get the real meaning of the word commitment, and so this is a little video, it's very short, of a U.S. Marine captain who was grievously wounded.
This is my second combat deployment to Afghanistan, and I just wish American people would understand there's a lot of people here that still believe in what we're doing out here, and are willing to come back again and again to prove that point.
That's an active duty U.S. Marine captain. You talk about commitment? For reasons beyond me, we decided not to put that up on Fox News because it was deemed by some to be too graphic. But I can tell you, Captain Matt Lampert is still on active duty. His wife is a Marine helicopter pilot, and will remain so until the baby. Oh, how about that? They weren't even allowed to cohabit over here. I have no idea how that could happen. Look, these are my heroes. I wanted to show you those because they're just like the ones whose 300 youngsters we're putting through college this year at Freedom Alliance. And the help that you're giving us to make that happen is important. And it's important for the following reasons. Not only the feeling of, gosh, this is a good thing to do. It is important that we treat the veterans and the service members and their families of this war as well as we possibly can. Because it is an all-volunteer force. So is the enemy's. They're an all-volunteer force. And so what I'm suggesting to you is, our goal is to have as many of them survive, and as many of their children prosper as possible, so that the next time we need a military, we're going to get one that's of the same high quality as the one we have today. I served for the better part of a quarter of a century as a U.S. Marine. I grew up in the United States Army. All of my uncles, my father, my brothers, all served in combat, different branches of the service. There has never been a military in any country at any time as good as the one we have today. And we're going to need one just like that to protect this nation in the future. And I want to just close by reminding you, in fact, I'll show you. I'll show you the words of the Commander-in-Chief I was blessed to serve for 5 years at the White House. Ronald Reagan understood that the purpose of a strong military is twofold. Number one, to deter war, and number two, to win one if you had to fight it. Those are important legacies of Ronald Reagan. And today's military is very much a reflection of what Ronald Reagan said in 1984, recognizing the heroism of those who went to Pointe du Hoc. And the following Veterans Day said this about America's heroes.
If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we achieved so much, prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and assured here than in any other place on earth. The price for this freedom at times has been high, but we have never been unwilling to pay that price. Those who say that we're in a time when there are no heroes, they just don't know where to look. The sloping hills of Arlington National Cemetery, with its row upon row of simple white markers bearing crosses or stars of David, they add up to only a tiny fraction of the price that has been paid for our freedom. Each one of those markers is a monument to the kind of hero I spoke of earlier. Their lives ended in places called Belleau Wood, the Argonne, Omaha Beach, Salerno, and halfway around the world on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Pork Chop Hill, the Chosin Reservoir, and in 100 rice paddies and jungles of a place called Vietnam. Under one such marker lies a young man, Martin Treptow, who left his job in a small-town barber shop in 1917 to go to France with the famed Rainbow Division. There on the Western Front, he was killed trying to carry a message between battalions under heavy artillery fire. We're told that on his body was found a diary. On the flyleaf, under the heading, My Pledge, he had written these words: America must win this war. Therefore I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure. I will fight cheerfully and do my utmost as if the issue of the whole struggle depended on me alone. We must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. It is a weapon that we as Americans do have. Let that be understood by those who practice terrorism and prey upon their neighbors. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. We are Americans.
Freedom Alliance licensed that so that we could show it to folks who understand what Ronald Reagan was talking about. I had the great blessing of serving him. He said things about me to tell my children that I've never thought of myself as a hero, but he called me one. And for that, my children and my grandchildren are grateful, as I am grateful to you for being part of this tonight. God bless you.